And we're back on another exciting episode of Starfleetboy, where we have a casual and informal discussion about Star Trek. Currently, we're focused on Star Trek Discovery. I almost said The Next Generation, which we're going to get back to very soon. And today's episode is our Chapter 1 review / discussion spectacular. Woo! And so for
spectacular.
For this discussion, we have most of the crew that's participated in the Discovery discussions here. We have Gary, aka Trekkerprise. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome back.
I was supposed to say something more. Wait, hang on. Energize.
Oh, you're so good at that. That's like your trademark on when you're in your channel opener. I love the way it starts. It's very cool. You guys can tell I'm fans of yours too. So this is I hope it's not too awkward that I
This is like super fans meet each other basically because we are fan of each other's work.
It is. It all turns out to be very awkward because we're all fans of each other, but.
Yeah.
the Us fan club. And we have Sean from Trek on the Tube. Hello.
Hello.
All right. So Sean, sorry. I said sorry yesterday, but sorry, I totally like spaced. I was in the mycelial network. And I lost track of space and time, and so we did the Into the Woods I Go discussion without you. However, I wanted to take a few minutes just to, if you could just summarize your thoughts. I know we could just go to your channel and watch your actual review with Easter eggs, but if you could just give us like a quicker version for Starfleetboy of what you thought, and we were waiting for your rating to complete the rating. So if you could give it your rating too, that'd be great.
Okay. So for those paying attention to Starfleetboy canon, yesterday I wasn't here. I was watching Justice League in theaters, which is an interesting experience.
Are you gonna do a thing about? You don't do anything outside of Star Trek often, right? Like,
no. Yeah. I even got told off by my wife because I've been tweeting too much about kind of irrelevant subjects. And so she told me, think about it this way: if people start following Trek on the Tube, they expect Trek content from your Twitter account. And if they're following, for example, Star Wars, they want Star Wars content. And if you start giving information about Lord of the Rings and what have you, then you're just a mix, and it doesn't make sense in their feeds. I'm like, okay, I can, okay.
It'd be cool if YouTube could let you have multiple channels on the same account, right? You can't do that right now, right?
Not really. You have to create a separate account, and then you kind of have to link them in, like, hey, this is my second channel.
Okay,
what most people used to do for their gaming channels back in the day. But
I gotcha.
Yeah. Into the Forest I Go. Episode 9 was maybe my second favorite episode in the season, after I think it was episode 6, Lethe.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that it got me really, really excited about the rest of the season, which is something that pretty much no episode has been able to do up until now. And I saw the best Klingon performance since T'Kuvma. So we had Cole speaking in English, and I think that English really helped. I have nothing against Klingon speaking in Klingon. It's just that I think it took away from their presence. What else? I think that the Starfleet buoys with the blinking lights was a bit ridiculous. But that was fine. I think the fact that the actual kind of mission that the solution that they came up with doing the 133 spore jumps took away from the importance of Pavo, the planet itself, and it also took away from Starfleet's importance. I mean, Starfleet have been working on trying to find a solution to this problem for months now, and the only thing they came up with was a planet, and then just Burnham and Saru, it took them 2 seconds on the bridge, like, hey, we can do this. Oh yeah. So that was a bit weird. But I think the episode was very well structured. It slowed down a little bit once spoilers, the sarcophagus ship was destroyed. It slowed down a little, but still we had like some pretty emotional moments. I was happy to see Sonequa Martin Green go back into those emotional kind of sequences that she had, the emotional scenes that she had in The Walking Dead. She was a very kind of, I don't know, she was something special to watch in The Walking Dead.
Is she still on that show?
No, they zombied her.
She became a zombie. Wow.
Yeah. She zombied herself actually.
Oh.
Because she knew that Star Trek was better.
Sorry for those of you, for those of you watching
of course.
The Walking Dead, and we just spoiled it for you. We're definitely a spoilerific show.
Oh, absolutely, we spoil everything.
I think so.
Yeah, no, I think the acting was good. The visuals were really nice to look at. The music was interesting. And for once, Discovery gave us some firsts in the sense that we got Klingon titties. Which, fair enough, it isn't necessarily the first that you're looking for in Star Trek, but it is a first, nonetheless. And yeah, I think it was a good episode.
All right, excellent. And so, what would your rating have been?
It's funny because I asked you if I was allowed to do 0.5s yesterday, and
Yes,
it just won't be that. It will be just a straight 7. So
a 7, excellent. I'm gonna add your. I was able to go back and get most of our ratings. I don't know what for some reason I can't find the ratings for Vulcan Hello and Binary Star, but just somewhere around averaging around 7. We were favorable to it, I think. But all right, cool. So I just created like a kind of a rough outline based on we've done these like season recaps before for Star Trek: The Next Generation in our TNG discussions, and so basically we're just going to go really quickly episode by episode and revisit what we thought about them and see if we changed our minds now that we've seen like chapter 1 in its entirety. Sean, you didn't actually come aboard Starfleetboy till Choose Your Pain, I think was your first, right? No,
you were doing a catch-up run because you were behind on a lot of episodes, so
I was, yeah. So the Butcher's Knife was your first episode.
I was the tool that helped you get up to speed.
Sean saves the day.
I was the Butcher's Knife.
You were the Butcher's Knife that cared not for Starfleet Boy's cry.
God, that makes me sound horrible. God.
No, it's good. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. The Vulcan Hello and the Battle of the Binary Stars, I think, was up until Lethe, definitely probably still my favorite in the whole series. And now after having seen the whole series, I still keep thinking about those 2 episodes because I feel like Discovery overall in chapter 1 maybe didn't really go where I expected to, which is not a bad thing. It just didn't go where I expected it to. It definitely went where it wanted to go, where it planned on going. But I just think a lot about those episodes, and ideally, I would have loved to have gone back and watched the whole chapter 1 from start to finish. But unfortunately, I did not have the 9 hours to to give to that. So I just went back and kind of like 10 minutes of our discussions, which funny enough, we kind of automatically recap our discussion. So audience, if you're like, oh my gosh, like, do I have to sit through an hour? No, just go to the last like 15 minutes of our discussion. So
you're saying that essentially we speak for like an hour for nothing, and then we have 15 minutes of recap time.
No, we're doing it properly. A discussion is a discussion. You have to get there, right? Like, I don't know what you're thinking until we go to it. But yes, essentially what I'm saying is if you want to get the cliff notes or skip ahead to like the point, you can go to the last 15 minutes of our discussions and get everything you need out of it. Because I certainly did. We did the Vulcan Hello, Gary and I, and the Battle of the Binary Stars as one episode. And at the end of the episode, the thing that kind of stood out in that discussion was that from that episode, I was predicting that we are already in an alternate universe, and that the show would go from there to like possibly what we consider the prime timeline. And it was mostly as a joke. You could tell I'm doing it in a humorous way because I was so like kind of shocked at how much Star Trek had changed in a way. It was both shocking and also, and I do still feel this way. It was like when I remember watching the premiere, I was so excited. I was so happy that Star Trek was back. But then I was also like, oh my God, what the hell is going on here? Like none of this is like, the Klingons especially were the biggest blow.
I think it's a defense mechanism that
And
us Trekkies have developed since the existence of the Kelvin timeline, which is anytime we see something that we don't necessarily approve of, oh, it's just a different timeline. Don't worry about it.
It totally is.
Fine.
But
I don't think that's
absolutely
necessarily the situation that we're in currently. I think Discovery is just prime and that's it. But all of us, we automatically, that has to be a different timeline. That's the Discovery timeline, it's all right. But that's where we go with it.
I totally do that. So it is my coping mechanism.
I find myself doing it with completely other franchises as well. I mean, every time something displeases me in another TV show, I'm like,
it's
not another timeline.
It's not the first time. The show Sherlock is the first time I had to do something to kind of rationalize what was happening. Sherlock, the TV series, which is awesome. I love it. I love the way the stories are told. I love the format that it's in and everything else about it. I just couldn't come to grips with the fact that it was modernized, that it was set in current day. I
didn't have any problem with that. I didn't have any problem with that, and the reason is because I think it was well executed, and the other thing is, the show overall was really cool, but in season 4 it just lost its magic. The first 2 seasons was the best. The third one was like, and the fourth one was, I don't even remember a single episode.
But essentially, by bringing Sherlock into current events, you have the problem of Conan Doyle exists in our universe. So how does Sherlock fit in to Sherlock Holmes and all that stuff? So it's just like whatever. To rationalize it, I started calling the show The Consulting Detective. So I was like, no, it's called The Consulting Detective, and it takes place in an alternate timeline. So that's how I rationalize it. So you're right, I do that. That's my default rationalization for when things don't fit into my understanding of the world. But hey, whatever, I do that. I at least part of it is knowing your flaws. The other thing we predicted, Gary and I, was that we felt the show was dark and that it was going to go from dark to bright to hopeful. And so I'm curious, did it like in chapter 1, do you see a progression from like this darkness to a more Star Trek hopefulness or not?
Till the end of the last episode, yes, I was kind of, but when we ended up in this new place, I was like, okay, they ruined everything again.
I think it went from dark to confused.
Yeah, mainly.
It has an identity crisis, really. I feel like the show is trying to be dark and be new and what have you, but it's also trying to kind of talk to fans in the sense that, hey, it's still Star Trek, it's still about hope. And so they still throw in these lines about we come in peace, and they still throw in these, we have to respect the Prime Directive or the General Order 1. But it seems more like they're playing it on the defensive rather than it actually being what the show is about, if that makes any sense.
I think we had this catchphrase or word for it, fan service. That's what
it's not even fan service. That's the thing. Fan service is showing your goal for no reason.
Yeah, spilling,
that's fan service.
Names, the names like Enterprise or Constitution class or Spock or whatever. Those are fan service, and even having the hope and
the good of the many. The good of the few, that kind of stuff, that might be fan service, but the way they're making the show kind of feels like they want to go dark, but they're afraid that if they go just too dark, then they'll lose everyone. Because Star Trek is supposed to be hopeful, and it feels like they want to keep that hopefulness because that's what, I don't know.
That's what everyone
When
loves
people
about
talk,
it.
well, when people talk about Star Trek, they talk about its hopefulness and its optimism and its diversity and what have you. And so they want to keep those to be able to promote it that way. But it feels like their story doesn't want to go in that direction. So they kind of, it's confusing. It's confusing and confused.
I believe that that's correct. Context is for Kings, the third episode, and also the second pilot, if you will. What that episode was average. It was like rated as a 5 basically, and there were too many kind of like questions that weren't really answered, but that didn't seem like that was intentional. It seemed like these were like things that the writers maybe forgot about, or like the writing was like disjointed, or perhaps even a bit lazy. I had that discussion with was kind of hopeful, and he was thinking maybe the thing is that the show is challenging our comfort with Star Trek, and how do we feel about that now? It would be great to have Humbert here to see. Well, I know how he feels. He actually has like completely abandoned Star Trek Discovery, so it's like, so it didn't work out for him. Remember that was a sentiment that was shared by a lot of fans online and everything. They were just like kind of like, okay, well, here's something, now we're aboard the Discovery, and like now the real story starts, I guess. And it was a cool like intro with the Shanzu and Captain Giorgio. But maybe that worked against Star Trek Discovery in a way, because to this day people are still like pining after wanting to see more adventures on the Shanzu and Captain Giorgio. So I wonder if it was a smart decision on the part of the creators to do it like that, instead of just like having flashbacks or like a short sequence in the beginning like DS9 did in its opening, where you saw the Battle of Wolf 39, but really you just saw the conclusion of it, instead of spending 2 episodes on it.
I think what would have been a very interesting idea is to give us an entire season about the USS Shenzhou with Captain Georgiou and Burnham as a first officer. That would have helped us kind of it would have helped them build relationships with all these characters that are on the Shenzhou. We would have known to love them, like them. We would have known to understand them. We would have gotten exploration, discovery, which are closer to Trekkie's hearts. So it would have been much more a Star Trek show. And then at the end of the season, you blow up the ship, you kill the captain, you start the war. Discovery where it is now in season 2.
Yeah.
And so you would have had the horrible sensation of losing your captain. You would have lost your ship. You would have lost all of these people that were cast, Connor, whatever his name was, to be helmsman. You would have really felt the loss. And Burnham's betrayal would have been much more impactful, because you would have seen her work in unison with Saru and Giorgio for an entire season.
And in fact, it would have been really
the war would have had more impact. You would have gone from exploration to now shit's real. We're in war.
It would have totally been. That's really awesome. And it would have paid off even more, because you'd be so invested by the time that the abrupt change happens. And like, I think
during this entire season, you could have dropped hints about, hey, there's these 2 weird, funky scientific sister ships out and about, called the Discovery and the Glenn, and apparently they've got some weird experience going on, but maybe we'll be able to travel like that one day. And you can just drop hints about that without necessarily spoiling too much about it. And at the end of the season, or in the next season when it picks up, you find yourself on one of those ships and you'll be hype about being on there, like, hey, we've heard about this for an entire season, now we're on it.
What would that show have been called? Because you'd be giving away so much if you called it Discovery. Like, you'd have to call it something completely different.
Not necessarily, because Discovery is...
it could be
in Star Trek.
The Surprise. You're right, and the Surprise could have been
DS9 and Voyager and Enterprise, but before that, it was the Next Generation. It was the animated series. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then you didn't have to name drop Glenn or Discovery. You could have just said there were 2 ships out there doing some,
Well, I think if you called it Star Trek Discovery and people just kind of assumed that it meant discovering, strange new worlds and new civilizations, and then all of a sudden you hit them with the fact that Burnham ends up on the ship called Discovery, I think
It's a
it
reveal
would have
itself.
totally worked. It would have been a reveal within itself that this is what, after a whole season, this is what the show is really going to be about. I love that. Hey, CBS, Sean's
too
your
late.
guy here. Like,
It's too late.
I think this speaks to our previous discussion about how the show does feel underdeveloped, because I mean, obviously, that could have been something that was more. There is this feeling of a lack throughout the series. Very cool idea, very interesting concept you just threw out there. Overall, in contexts for Kings, I guess we discover what the purpose of the discovery actually is. She's got this spore drive, and not much happens outside of that. We get introduced to some of the characters, like what was Rekha Sharma's character's name, the security officer.
Landry.
Landry, thank you. Poor Landry. Poor Landry. She could have.
So important we can't even remember her.
That's the thing, you see. They announced a lot of characters from the very beginning before they actually show the pilot, and then we got these enormous and long list of names, and then half of them dead from the first episode.
It's true.
Or the second.
That was kind of.
It's like, what? Why?
That was kind of a bummer, because it's true, the hype is, when you get involved in the hype of the pre-release, you're like looking up all these characters. Like, I didn't know who Chris Obi was until Star Trek Discovery, and I started getting into him and excited, and then I'm like, oh,
and
man,
you realize he played in Doctor Who for one episode, then he been killed by a Cyberman.
Right, and then the same thing happens to him on Discovery. He's only in the pilot 2 episodes.
To be fair, I think you only disprove of that kind of marketing because the season didn't please you as much as it should have. If you were truly enjoying Discovery, and if you had really, really liked the episodes, I think you would actually praise the fact that they were able to trick you in that way.
Yeah,
because
it's true.
You think about all of these characters, you think, hey, they're gonna be on the show, but turns out, mind blown, they kill them all. And that's an interesting way to kind of market your show, especially considering how secretive they were and how good they are at keeping their secrets. So I think you would have praised them if you had enjoyed the show. The problem is you're left with the fact that Giorgio and Chris Obi's Takuvma were the best things on Discovery, or are the best things on Discovery so far, which is a little disappointing, because
the show should get better every episode.
First 2 episodes, though, I don't think they're that good.
Well, I think that
a TV budget J.J. Abrams film.
No, I totally agree with that. But the performances, ultimately, like, what's great about that kind of situation is that, like, both Michelle Yeoh and Chris Obi really kill it. Like, I mean, I guess you could say they stole the show, because especially Michelle Yeoh, I'm like, God, like, it just kind of lived up to the lineage of captains, because all the actors that have played captains so far have been just so great. William Shatner, obviously he's the original deal, and like the iconic Captain Kirk, but Patrick Stewart coming to Star Trek was like he wasn't very known outside of a circle of like Shakespeare loving enthusiasts and people who've seen movies like Dune or Life Force classics. But then it's no small thing to get an actor of Patrick Stewart's caliber on Star Trek. Like, he definitely makes Captain Picard who he is. Like, it's all Patrick Stewart. The writers, of course, get credit, but Patrick Stewart like brings that writing to life in a way that I don't think even Gene Roddenberry could have expected. And actually, Gene Roddenberry, I think, didn't like him in the beginning. But then you have on Deep Space Nine, Avery Brooks, who is totally different from anything, aside from exploring the first African origin on Earth, like, you know, he wouldn't be like on Earth of his century, there wouldn't be any like big deal about it. But on TV, he was like a big deal because Star Trek hadn't really had like a lead commander who was African American or African descent, and so they did a great job with him. But just Avery Brooks in general has such a unique style of acting and like an interesting way of performing, and like his voice inflections are just wonderful. And so Captain Sisko, again, now he becomes, you know, an awesome addition to the pantheon. I loved, you know, Michelle Yeoh for the very same reason. Like, she had this like, there was something about her that you wanted to get to know more about her character, Captain Giorgio. And I think that that's something that I think Star Trek Discovery made a mistake by focusing the show completely on Burnham, because there's so many other great, do an ensemble series, you get to really explore each of the characters. And like, just because the captain, you know, traditionally has been the central focus of the show, doesn't mean that they couldn't have still had Burnham as the central focus. But still, I think that the show doesn't give enough airtime or attention to the other characters, and I think that's a shame. So like, I don't really care that much about Captain Lorca. I like how devious he is, and I like that he's kind of like a darker, you know, questionable character, but at the same time, I don't really like, I'm not as invested in him as I was with my previous captains.
Continuing on what you just, building on what you just said, at first I didn't understand the idea, like when they just said that all the shows, the main characters were the captains. It took me a while to accept that, because I think generally speaking, Trekkies always assumed that the crew were the main characters.
Correct.
So it took me a while to analyze and process and think, yes, Picard, Kirk, you know, they are the main characters, because we kind of see everything from their perspective. And then you think about it and you think, yes, it's logical that you see things from their perspective because you're on a ship. And if you see things from an ensign's perspective, then all you're going to see is the ship shaking in every episode with no context.
Right.
But then I thought, hey, a first officer, that's very interesting because, but it's interesting only in the sense that you don't show us what's going on with Lorca whatsoever. It's only interesting if you show us really how it is to be a first officer, in the sense that Riker is always interacting with these head of departments and he's always dealing with all this shit, but he doesn't know what's going on in Picard's office 100% of the time. And that's an interesting take, in the sense that, hey, you don't know everything that's going on the ship, but you have kind of an access to these lower decks. And I think that would have been a very interesting take. And I think maybe that's what Brian Fuller was going for when he said they would be a first officer.
So, yeah.
But at the end of the day, not only she's not a first officer, she's a convicted felon. That's let, you know, that's given the possibility to roam free on the ship for whatever reason. But we're given too much of Lorca's perspective. We know as much as what's going on the ship as we knew on TNG or DS9, except for the certain things that they're hiding from us just for the point of creating intrigue, which is disappointing.
Yeah, and going back to the episode for a moment, we still, after the whole season has kind of passed, we still don't really understand the dubious circumstances in which Burnham comes aboard the Discovery, or Captain Lorca's like kind of vehement attachment to her. Like, he's very like protective and attached to Burnham. And Sonequa Martin Green on After Trek said that it's because maybe Lorca sees something of himself in Michael Burnham, and so that was because it was asked actually that last episode of
that's just
of
actors
Trek on the well, yeah, but like, you know, it's interesting. The actors, I think, have
the threads that they begin, they never follow up on. Be it Stamets in the Mirror,
that's true.
The Vulcan extremists, the Black Badges, why Lorca is attached to Burnham, they just kind of fly over it.
These could all be setups, though, for a longer game. I mean, maybe
I know, but you need to pay at least one off to
do something. That's true. No, you're right. Like, it would be nice if they did, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, that they are playing a longer game here, and like all these things that they know. It's almost like the writers are like, I know this is going to piss off people if we don't answer this right now, so I'm going to accumulate all these little things. That being said, I mean, I think something interesting to do would be to create a list of all the loose threads and see if we can like come up with like, what is that? What do you have on your shirt?
That's my USS Enterprise shirt.
That's awesome.
Someone got so mad because it's the original series writing, but it's not the original series ship. It's not coherent. Come on.
The many fonts of Star Trek. Our lead graphic designer here have something to say about that.
Oh, Woody.
Gary's lost.
I don't know. He's lost in thought.
He's in deep thought. Gary,
What?
Gary is traveling the mycelial plane.
Yeah, what are you thinking about there, kiddo?
No, you've been talking about Discovery, and I decided to watch the trailer for the Discovery just to see what I was missing. So I was watching the first 2.5 minute trailer. Sorry, I didn't. But I'm listening. I was listening. So what was the?
Actually, interesting. So you just watched the trailer? Okay. So is there a?
Yeah.
Watching the trailer, did you get what you were promised? Watching the series, did you get what you were promised by the trailer, or do you feel like it was something else?
The whole thing, watching the trailer, it feels like I was watching that trailer for a movie, for a motion picture.
Okay.
That's what I feel. That's what I felt. And if I think about Star Trek Discovery as what was the most memorable moment and was the most memorable episode, and how I think about Discovery, the first 2 episodes comes to my mind only. The others are fading out. I'm really sad to say that, but the others are fading out. The first episode was really good. It was really like a big motion picture, and it was beautiful. It was well written. I had a couple of issues with it, but if it's just a single movie,
again, probably a mistake to, probably a mistake to open a series with such an investment of 2 episodes on a portion of the character's past, which we're never going to come back to in the rest of the series. It'd be one thing if we kept referring to it as the fact that it was necessary to go through to see her become court-martialed and prisoner number 1. Basically, she's like, the most important prisoner in the quadrant. Yeah, exactly, right. So
the funny thing is, and this is what I was thinking the last couple of times when we had these discussions, and I had to talk with about Discovery with anyone. The first 2 episodes brought us in. It was familiar in a sense, especially the first episode, because it gave us that hopeful, positive, futuristic look and feel that we got to know from the different shows, the previous Star Trek shows, and then suddenly we just changed. So we got to this. Okay, this feels familiar. This seems familiar. This is familiar, but then it's not.
I see the intention, though. I mean, like, one of the things I remember us remarking when we saw the first 2 episodes was that scene where you see the crew just kind of like right before the battle starts, when they're still trying to what the heck the anomalous object is in the debris field. All of that is so on point Star Trek, even down to like following procedures for investigating and like
the bridges. It's really
feels
familiar.
All the camaraderie and everything like that. You're right, it's on point. So I think the intention, Gary, might have been was to show you like, yeah, this is what war.
This is what you used to, and then you slap in your face, and then something else.
But in a way, this is what war does to a system or a normal way of being. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like something that we don't. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of like I get the intention. Do I think it was executed well? No, I don't. But I see what the intention was.
But we had war. We had war in DS9 for 4 entire seasons. We had war. We had like really deep moments and really deep episodes that that felt like it was okay. It's a serious thing.
Yeah.
And then there you go. The others are just, they still, those episodes had some feeling into it.
I agree. The war that we have in Deep Space Nine, entire Federation, and yet we still keep hopefulness and optimism.
Yeah.
Compare this to is kind of the Xindi situation that they have in Enterprise. That is not only 50 years before this time, but it's also before the Federation was created, as the only ship having to deal with this, which means Captain Archer becomes darker. The whole series becomes very dark.
Yeah.
And the ship itself and the crew itself start doing things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily see a ship do, but then in context it works because they are the first ship exploring deep space. They have to deal with a threat that's going to destroy the Earth, and they're on their own.
Yeah, and like
So it
same
makes sense.
Yeah. But in that same season, we still never lose the exploration factor because they're trying to figure out the mystery of the sphere builders and how it's changing space, and there's a lot of science involved. There's even an episode where Trip has to be regrown as a clone to save his life, and I mean, there's just like,
which is a very morally troubling episode. But
there's
a situation made out of Archer having to torture someone. It's important.
Yeah.
It's something that he didn't think he would ever do. No one actually believed him on the ship. No one thought that he would do that.
But again, Sean, you had 2 seasons of getting to know these characters and following them on a normal kind of thing, and you're so to your point, the payoff and like the investment makes sense. Whereas here, you're expected to.
Well,
you're expected to like
that instead of for example, Star Trek 4 is the fish out of water kind of scenario.
Hey, Gary went to. Oh, okay, sorry. I see what happened. Gary went to logo only.
Okay.
Yeah, now the only. No, it's just I experienced some glitching in the system, and I thought maybe it's from my side. So if I distort the stream, then that's better to go to.
I have a very nicely crafted logo. It's talking to me right now.
I know you do too.
That's gonna change soon.
Do you guys, Sean? Don't forget your thought. But real quick sidebar: do you guys remember in the original series the episode where your consciousness would go into those orbs? Remember, like those. Gary, could you create those orbs graphically, and then we could put them, all as our channel icons?
Just in case, like when we have technical difficulties, we can do that.
Difficulties.
Wow.
And then it could just be these orbs that are talking to each other.
That would be wicked. And you know what? Even if someone watches this in YouTube, I'm pretty sure they're much happier to see the Enterprise and the Chevron than me. So
no, you have that.
They can see me on my channel.
You have those 11th Doctor good looks. I'm sure all the girls are not like happy right now that you're just a logo. And boys. The girls and
if any of those girls listening and they want to get in touch with me, just go to my website and contact me. That was very cheesy and sad. I know.
This has become like a dating podcast.
Oh, jeez, we really digress. Okay, do you remember your thought? Because I totally
I do. I was going to say that there's a classic trope in storytelling in general. It's the fish out of water scenario. Take, for example, in Star Trek 4, get a bunch of guys from the future, throw them back in the past. And you can do this with pretty much any television series or any movie that you got. It feels like in this instance, they wanted the fish out of water to be us, which is an interesting take. The audience is the fish out of water in the sense that we were given Star Trek, but it's not how we're used to, which is interesting. But the changes applied to Star Trek are too extensive or have no coherence. Which means it's not just hey, this is Star Trek but in time of war. It's like this is not really the Star Trek that you know, and it's not even in the context that you're used to. Which I don't know. It's too much. There was this interesting argument about the Klingons that said that the reason why they completely changed visually is to make them feel alien to us, the audience that is like the hardcore Trekkies that know all about Star Trek. It's because actually scary to us as an audience to dive into something that is completely new. And I like that thought. I like that applying the scariness of the Klingons to the crew's kind of, it works on us as well as the audience.
Right.
But it all
right.
it still needs to make sense somehow.
So if you're watching Star Trek for the first time and Discovery is your gateway into Star Trek, maybe all these devices are working really well. But the problem with this kind of storytelling, when you're dealing with a show that has like a built-in audience of fans who are also going to be watching, and I don't know what the makeup is for new versus fans, but I can only imagine that there are more people who are already pre-existing fans of Star Trek watching Discovery than there are new people that are just tuning into Discovery as their very first Star Trek experience.
As I talk about this at work, I know people that are Trekkies and, you know, they have pretty much similar thoughts as us. People that know a little bit about Star Trek, that have seen a bit of TNG, they're the ones being the most invested because they already know a little bit about this, a little bit about that, and now they've been given it to them in a more modern way. The two people that I know that know nothing about Star Trek at all dropped by the end of episode 3.
Really?
Yep. They were just completely lost. At the end of the day, to us, everything that we see on screen makes sense, and we can even rage about it because it doesn't make sense. But these people that are completely new, there's just too much implied backstory in these first episodes. We may not notice it, but they were lost. These two people that were talking to me, they said, like, I don't know anything about Klingons. And I said, well, isn't that the point? Because I don't know anything about these Klingons either. And they said, yeah, but even if you know different Klingons, you still know them. I don't know anything. And we're supposed to know everything about, like, it's... Anyway, they dropped at episode 3, both people.
I took note of
didn't talk to each other, by the way.
That's interesting. I took note of what you said earlier about how like it was kind of a neat thing when the universal translator translated Cole and we heard him speaking in English. And I think that now after seeing Star Trek Discovery, as cool as it is that the Klingon spoke Klingon, it really was difficult for me, even as like like I had to rewind a lot to like see what the dialogue was. And it was when you're focused so much on reading this like really intense kind of like Shakespearean style dialogue, attention to any of the subtleties that the actors are maybe trying to convey. So I think that like as cool as it is and as authentic it is to have Klingon speaking Klingon, I think if I were going to redo Star Trek Discovery, one of the choices I would make is to have the Klingons speak English and just chalk it up to the universal translator works in our TV all the time. Like
even in the last episode, I think that was much better to have Cole talking in English with with
Laurel when she speaks English
that was so cool
with the Admiral.
Finally, I thought, okay, the Klingons are really Klingons in a sense. They felt more Klingon.
Yeah, Kenneth Mitchell's performance overshadowed what is it, Mary Chiefos so much. I completely forgot Laurel spoke in English. I agree with the fact that they should speak in Klingon, and if I were to write a Star Trek television series, I would have scenes where Klingons speak Klingon, and I would have scenes where Romulans speak Romulan, and etc. But those scenes have to be kind of sweet and short, and they like the fact that they're speaking their own language has to have some sort of impact. It has to be like, oh my god, they're menacing because they're speaking in their language. But if you don't 100% follow what they're saying, you get the gist of what's going on. They're organizing an attack. They're introducing a character, something. I mean, pretty straight to the point. But when they start conversing about plans, about when they're being devious, when they're talking to the enemy, that's when you want them to be speaking in English, because you need the audience to be able to understand that and understand all of the context and everything that's going on.
Context is for kings.
Moving on from
Context is for Klingons in this
it is true.
in this situation, but
so then we move on to episode 4, The Butcher's Knife Cares Not for the Lamb's Cry, and it averaged out to about a 4 for that episode, and that's where you came and saved the day, Sean. And the main thing I remember from that episode is that I felt a lack of connection to the danger on the dilithium mine planet, and then again there were all these like little details that kind of fought against the overall story. And one of the ones that you pointed out, Sean, was how like, well, the Discovery was the only ship within range, and so they had to jump there as quickly as possible, yet it takes them like 5 hours to get there, which would have given enough time for another Starfleet ship to possibly warp there. And so there's just like, the danger was just completely like diminished by this like lollygagging and this kind of like story, which would have been interesting but it didn't fit the danger, if you will, of this like dilithium mine. They were under attack for like 5 or 6 hours by Klingons, and is when their shields fail on the colony. I think in reality what would have happened is that the dilithium mine would have been overrun long before the Discovery got there. No attack. I can't imagine that, unless you're attacking a planet like Earth, which would have formidable defenses. I can't imagine, even though dilithium's a resource that's worth protecting, like it took 5 hours for
any way you look at it, it doesn't make sense, because the way it was presented to us, it makes sense that the shields were so strong because they provide 40%, but 40% is too much. Not one colony should be providing 40% of the dilithium for the entire Federation. It's just stupid. I mean, story-wise, that's just ridiculous. 14 is already huge. So assuming 40% is, the choice that whatever, the shields are supposed to be very strong, but then they presented the attack kind of like a skirmish, kind of like, hey, these Klingon raiders are just having fun attacking whatever outpost they find. Shouldn't be that. It should be a full-scale mounted attack.
Right.
You send your entire fucking fleet to bring that shit down.
There should have been a Cylon base star.
Take all the dilithium for yourself and leave. Right? You should bring the Mega Death Star and the Death Star of Prey, right? And
or the Death Ship, which was floating for 6 months in space, which is another one of those things that we don't like understand. It's like
yeah, no, I mean it was a bit weird, and again, yeah, the Admiral tells them you have, like, the nearest ship is 4 hours away, but then it takes them 5 hours to get the jump ready, and so they jump there, but then the other ship could have been there an hour before them. So that wasn't one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah, so that episode we collectively we gave it a 4.
Yeah, that's pretty low.
It's a pretty low episode. Then Gary, were you was that the episode where you were the Butcher's Knife? No, it was the next. No, it was later. There's a moment on Starfleetboy where you're just like, I don't want to think about it anymore. You're like so frustrated, and I can't remember when.
No, it's not. Not at all. Just I'm kind of thinking, because I remember I've been ejected once.
You will not get ejected. It was to help you solve your bandwidth problems. I would never eject you for your opinion.
No. I'm just joking. If I would have known,
censorship,
switching off the audio only might have actually saved the day. But
there is no censorship on Starfleetboy. However, I will remind our guest hosts here that we do try our best to stay at PG-13. If possible, we try. It's okay. It's I've
PG-13 films are allowed to say the F word once.
I know, and we do it once at least every show. So we're fine. And I've been one of my YouTube videos got downgraded in its advertisability because I was openly drinking beer on
Oh
the
God.
show. Understandable too. Yeah. You can. I think you can drink a beverage, but you just can't say that it's alcohol if you're gonna.
Hey, Coca-Cola is fine.
There's an amazing robot that listens to all our audio and catches these keywords, and I'm wondering
Well,
how.
amazing is maybe a good word, but a big word. There's a robot, that's for sure.
Creepy robot that does all that. So Choose Your Pain was the next episode. We collectively on that discussion gave it a 6, like around a 6, we really liked that episode.
Really likable episode.
It was,
in retrospect, I think we were overhyped by it because it was following a pretty terrible episode.
Yes,
it was. You're right. So
I'm going to be fair.
That's a good point. But the things that stood out from that discussion was: do the Klingons hold up? Do they act like Klingons? Feel like Klingons? And how do you feel about that now that you've seen Chapter 1?
That's a very interesting inquiry. Gary?
So how do I feel about this episode? Still, I think it's the same.
How you feel about the episode, but in general, in the beginning, most people had a problem with the Klingons. So the question we asked in this episode is: are the Klingons? Do they, for aesthetic changes for a moment? Do the Klingons act like Klingons? Do they feel like Klingons? Do you accept them as Klingons? And how do you feel about that now that you've seen Chapter 1 completely? Like, how do you feel about the Klingons overall?
Still, I don't know. I still have the kind of issues with them.
Articulate, what your issues are.
It didn't feel like they're Klingons.
So
I know it's I'm not saying anything, but they were just a bunch of creepy aliens interrogating 2 or 3 Starfleet officers. It's a different side of the Klingons as well, different side of the Federation. Everything is different, and I'm being so negative. I know I should stop talking.
So later on, the reason we were, I think, one good reason why we feel that way is that later on we especially Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, you really dive into the Klingons. I mean, like, you really get to know the Klingon history, culture, myths, not just through Worf, but you get a lot of Klingon action, and then Enterprise deals with them a little bit too, based on what the Next Generation was. But if you take into consideration, at this point in the Federation's history, really the Federation much about Klingons. So going back to like our earlier point of like maybe the idea behind this whole Klingon redesign was to kind of get us, the audience, to feel like these are aliens once again, to get that feeling again of like we don't really know who these people are.
Yeah.
I think that's what was trying to be done here, but I think it failed because, unfortunately, again, if you do have context for the Klingons, you want to see, especially because we spend so much more time with the Klingons in Chapter 1, you really want to see some of that reflected here. And I saw none of that. We have mentions of Kalis, and that's about it. I don't even think we even have any scenes that go to the Klingon homeworld. And this is something kind of upsetting too, because like, why we couldn't have had scenes on Starfleet Command on Earth. There's no reason. I mean, this is now a show with a huge budget, much bigger, but it feels like the show with the least budget of all the shows, barring maybe Enterprise. Like, it feels like this show,
because we don't even get on-screen communications, which would have to show a sit behind someone. They give us holograms, which means they only need to film a person,
not a set. And so again, lack of planets, lack of it. The universe doesn't seem big in that.
We were promised something grandiose in the scope of Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones takes place over many, many, many different kind of cities, landscapes.
It's crazy, yeah.
All of these different sets, and okay, fine. Half of what you see on screen is CG. But does that matter? I don't care, because that's what we get in... You're going to go see Avengers Infinity War, it's 90% CG anyway. It's almost a cartoon at this point. So it doesn't really matter on a TV show. I would have loved to
And
see
I
Starfleet headquarters. I would have loved.
headquarters or yeah, and you do get like the one time. I think one of the reasons why Lethe was so exciting is that you get those awesome scenes on Vulcan,
Mm.
and
But again, it would have been interesting to see just
you really
once a Vulcan street, like just a character walking out of a house and into another house. Follow him down the street. CG every building. I don't care.
something different, and certainly an opportunity to see the Klingon homeworld at this point in history would have been neat as well. So again, the only planet we ever see actually outside of I think the only time we see a planet is Pavo, right, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
is there a planet next to the starbase?
No, but I mean, like, yeah, there is, but I
we're
mean,
not on
actually
it.
we're
We're not
not
on
on
it.
it. Like, we never go on it or anything like that. So
I will say something. That is something that lacks in the Next Generation. I'm rewatching the Next Generation with my wife, and
oh, nice. We hope that you'll watch.
don't leave the ship enough.
We hope that you'll listen to Starfleet Boy on podcast after you watch your episodes.
I'm too far. Season 6, but yeah, no, there's
Nice touch.
I really am frustrated to some certain extent with with TNG because they don't leave the ship enough. Most of the stories that they figure out that happen to them happen on the ship.
Are you guys on season 1?
Season 6.
You're already on season 6, because I think that maybe season 6 maybe is a little bit more isolated, but I certainly remember in season 1 like and season 2 practically like almost every episode had to deal with like some kind of planet. Like on season 1, granted they all look the same, but we they all have that same map painting of the same buildings, but we go down to that planet with where Luton is, then we have Angel 1, and we go down to their planet, and then we go down to an encounter of Farpoint. We visit Farpoint Station, and so I think that like maybe season 6 is like that. I can't remember.
It's just generally speaking, the feel I got from TNG in general compared to the original series is you're much less walking around on the surface.
It's possibly
it's really rare when you see Waxana Troy having a picnic or something. You're like, hey, look, there's grass. The main thing I look for is grass, and because I know we often go down to buildings and you often see like interior designs, but it is just gray walls. Which doesn't really differentiate from the ship. And okay, granted, you're on the surface of a planet, but still, it's usually just Geordi.
You're not seeing
with
like
the engineer on site trying to deal with something.
As opposed
I like
to
to see
landscape, yeah.
Yeah, trees and grass. And if I see trees and grass in an episode, then it really feels like you're out there exploring somewhere, and you feel less caged in.
Well,
anyway, coming back to Discovery does not do that ever. It only does that once, but only 9 episodes for the moment.
Except it did do it in. I forgot it did do it on the Crepusculan planet, which is way in the on the Vulcan Hello. That's like
that's the teaser for the entire series.
Tatooine in that episode. It was kind of
which is one of the probably one of the most beautiful moments visually.
Yeah, it was really pretty. It was done well. So
we get Vulcan, we get Pavo, and then we get whatever that planet was.
But Crepuscula.
Well, that's the name of the creatures, but I don't know what the planet was.
It's called Trekkerprise 1.
No, not at all. don't get me involved.
The other thing in Choose Your Pain, we're introduced to Ash Tyler, and we get this kind of this like mystery of who is Javed Iqbal, and
well, that's the episode. Vok disappears entirely, and Ash Tyler appears. There's no transition period. There's just
there's no So there's very hard evidence. It's very very heavily implied.
But his name is still. His name is from episode 1 to episode 9, in the same spot, in the opening credits.
Very suspicious.
Which is interesting because I even noticed this on episode 3. I was like, hey, they've got this name down, but he's supposed to be Ash Tyler, and we haven't seen him yet. Why is his name already there?
Right.
Did you notice actually in the first and I didn't check
Not the first two. Not
didn't,
when we did our screening. I didn't. It was
no,
the
but
week.
the week after, did they actually said in the cast list like Javid Iqbal?
Javid Iqbal has never been written on in the credits.
That's just a big BS then.
Yes, of course, it's a big BS. Vok is Ash Tyler, and we've all figured it out, and they're just frustrated. The same way, everyone knew Khan was the enemy to Into Darkness.
File saying Javid Iqbal is in Vok, and then they didn't even
Everyone knew
his
Khan.
name in the official series.
Everyone knew Khan was going to be the bad guy in Into Darkness, but then J.J. Abrams said no, like a child, because he was frustrated that everyone figured it out. And then they gave him, and then they gave him another name for the beginning, and then everyone it all backfired on him. But this is the same thing.
John,
no,
it's so funny.
I mean, I'm sorry. It's just that's what it is.
It's true.
It cannot be that. I want Vok to be out there looking for the House of Mog and bringing them over.
And also, ideally, Vok should have been the one that killed Cole and continued Takuvma's light parade. But the other thing that came up in that episode was that at the time I speculated that Lorca knew that he knew that something was up with Tyler, and that he's not genuine, and that he's like somehow either brainwashed or something by the Klingons. I wondered if I still felt the same way now after seeing chapter 1. And actually, no, I feel like that whole plot was dropped. Like that whole like kind of idea was dropped. Like Lorca doesn't even think about Tyler anymore. Like he went from being like Lorca's golden boy sidekick to like, okay, whatever, go on this away mission. Like Lorca's kind of a character that like has changed throughout the course of the show, but I'm not really sure that it's working for me.
The same way Stamets in the beginning refuses to share his secrets with Burnham. And then he kind of receives the order like, hey, deal with it. She's here. She's working with us. But this is still his life work. And it's just weird that he all of a sudden becomes friends with Burnham and just they share everything. She's still a convicted felon. She still should be, they shouldn't be sharing everything with her, but she's aware of pretty much everything that's going on the ship. She knows more than Saru.
But I think that like one thing I'll say about that is that like, as the audience I don't know how you feel, but like I don't think it was necessarily fair what happened. I don't think Burnham deserved like what she got. Like I think a lot of it
she didn't start the war, in my opinion.
Is she right? I think the war was she may have been like the straw that broke the camel's back, but it was inevitably going to happen. But regardless of that, I think that like
but the war had already begun before she killed Takuvma. The fact that she killed Takuvma did not start the war. The war had already begun.
Right, but it kind of like it was like a rallying. She turned Takuvma into a martyr, basically, and it was like a rallying.
He was going to rally them anyway.
That's true. I guess you're right.
Alive, he was going to do that anyway. They just kind of saw it in a different light, and so they blamed her.
Starfleet's perspective, she definitely committed mutiny, and whether or not she is responsible for the war, many of the people in Starfleet think that her actions are what led to the incident at the binary stars, because she was kind of how should I say this? She was negligent in her duties. First of all, she was ordered by her captain to only do a flyby of the anomalous, the Kalis, what is it called? The beacon of Kalis, but they didn't know what it was. But instead of just doing a flyby, she lands on the freaking thing, and she can't help herself. She has to do these like things even though she's ordered not to. And then on top of that, she consults with Sarek, and based on an anecdote about Klingons and Vulcans, she suddenly decides that like this is the answer, that like if we fire first, it'll prevent an incident. And then she, proceeds to create chaos among the crew and even knocks her captain out. And I mean, like, that's pretty serious what she does. But had Captain Giorgio lived, I think she would have totally have recommended a lesser. I don't think she would have taken away Burnham's command. Had she lived, I think she would have seen, especially since Burnham was integral in helping to kind of fix it when they were going to go and capture Takuma. But how could we have known that Captain Giorgio would die? So I think that like she's a victim of circumstance, if you will. So I think that the crew of the Discovery can recognize that. Like, I think working with Burnham, you start to realize there's something more to this person. She's not just like a bad, mutineer or whatever, that more to it. And so I do think the show was successful in conveying that. And I thought that it was really great that like we were working towards like a redemption for Burnham, if you will. We still haven't gotten that redemption, but like maybe, now that the Admiral Cornwall has seen Burnham's true mettle, if you will, like maybe something will happen, and Burnham will be if not re-enlisted. We were joking, Gary and I, and saying that maybe she'll become a boomer and travel on freighters or something like that.
Harry Mudd.
No longer have a life sentence. And I think that the show definitely was working to that. But again, because we're now in this somewhere else, we don't know where the hell Discovery is. All that's on hold. And if the ship even does get back to wherever they're from, we'll find out what happens to Burnham. But now all of that's out the window. Discovery's in a completely unknown place at the end of the chapter, and like everything we kind of invested in the season is potentially, depending on what they decide to do, if they decide to completely in this other place, then none of what we were just experiencing matters for the time being, at least. So it is a weird show. Like, I don't really it's delivering in the sense of a traditional show. Is it working for me? Not quite. Am I going to stick around? Only because it's Star Trek.
Maybe it's titled Star Trek.
I want to go back on what I just said and correct myself. Having watched the end credits for episode 1, Javid Iqbal is in the credits for Avok.
Oh.
So he might be a real person.
Well, he always tweets as a real actor, so.
No, he doesn't.
No, that's fake, like that was that joke account.
He doesn't exist.
It's a fake account, but
anyways,
he is written down as a real. But then again, I mean, I forget his name, but it proves my point. He's got 50 different stage names. Dr. Bashir.
Oh yeah, Alexander Siddig.
Yeah, he changes
Alexander Siddig. Yeah,
he changes his name several times in Star Trek, and I think the name he has in Gotham is different as well, because his name is very, very long, and so he chooses an alias depending on whatever, I don't know. But so Javid Iqbal could be just another name for Shazad Latif.
I think someone had figured out that Shazad Latif's middle name was Javid or Iqbal or something. I forget what it was.
Yeah, it's Shazad Iqbal Latif something.
Oh, very suspicious. Anyways, we already know what's up. So going to Lethe, that episode, Gary gave it an 8. You gave it
his name is Shazad Iqbal. Stage name Shazad Latif.
Oh.
Bloody bastard.
I got excited.
Look at that
for a moment, because I have a relative with the last name Latif, and I thought, am I related to Shazad Latif? But now you've just dashed my.
No, he stole your name.
He stole my name, Latif. So you gave that episode a 7. Gary gave Lethe. Now we're on, by the way. Gary gave it an 8, and I gave it a 7.5. So
8. I don't even understand.
Because I totally agree with John. Like, when the previous episode is terrible, like, you're gonna love the next episode if it's better.
That was good. I think so far that was one of my favorite.
I
If I
think
have a
Lethe
I
was
have
the
a
most.
favorite. Yeah, that was the most watchable.
I think that Lethe was the most Star Trek the way we know it, because one of the writers wrote so much Star Trek. I forget, we discussed it at the time, how it felt different because there truly was something different in it, and it was like this veteran actor. So I recommend that Discovery do more of this, like bringing veteran writers in, at least to help the new writers who, again, you can't blame them for. There's so many factors that go into the making of a TV show, everything from development time to production costs to everything. So like writers, I'm not trying to say that the writers of Discovery are the wrong writers or that they're bad writers. I'm just saying that there are definite signs that they're not yet at their full stride. They're not yet there. They're still amping up, if you will. So I hope that, like, now that the show has been greenlit for a second season, that they'll have time to like develop things that they didn't have time to develop before. But Lethe felt really well done, and I still have that feeling about it. I haven't seen it again to like really say so, but I do still feel really positive about it. We all like this episode. Do you guys still feel that way about this episode?
Absolutely.
Gary, you just said you did, yeah.
Absolutely.
What worked about it, which is that mix of the original, kind of like a older writer from that wrote a lot of Star Trek with the new writers. What do you guys think worked so well?
For me, it stood out aesthetically. First of all,
Yeah.
it's not blue like if I were to choose a color, to designate an episode of Star Trek Discovery, all of them would be blue except Lethe, which would maybe be yellow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and like some purpley greens and things like that too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot about the nebula. I didn't like that, but the just the Vulcan side of it stood out so much for me that the episode feels completely different in that sense. It feels unique. It really works, and thematically, the Vulcan extremist is that we've already seen in TNG. We've already seen in Enterprise, so it is Vulcan logic extremists. So thematically, it brings back it. It took the time to kind of explain a little more about the Katra, which I thought was very much exaggerated in those first two pilot episodes. I was thinking, Katra, this wasn't how they showed it before. Granted, we don't know much about Vulcans, but it just felt a little too exaggerated. But then I suppose it went back and it helped me justify that a little more. I don't know. It helped me work through Discovery, and it felt more Star Trek in that sense. And also, there was some classic Trek problem solving. Like, we have to find a lost shuttle in a nebula with this crazy guy with essentially Professor Xavier. He's got these strong waves, and he's sending them out into the universe. We need to find him.
Right.
How can we do that? We're going to find some technological way to hook it up to your brain to connect to him. And that felt very Star Trek, because that's something that I would see Geordi and Data and, yes, Ensign Crusher work on that.
that was.
And yeah, I would see the trio work on trying to find a solution like that. So it did feel
very nice.
Yeah.
So Lethe still holds up for you. How about you, Gary?
No, I like the classic side of it. So we got back to this ancient civilization, and I mean, got back to the Balkans, and we got to know quite a few details about the Sarak family and generally about how Burnham got rejected and how she started to blame herself on her failure, and that wasn't her failure at all. So it was a really interesting backstory for the character itself, and a really interesting scenery for the Balkan culture. So I really enjoy thinking about that episode, and it was really cool. So that's really that was a true storytelling for the show. I think that's why it stood out quite well, because it gave you some something human about it.
I think it also made me accept James Frain as Sarek. I
Yeah.
liked him and his performance and his take on Sarek and the whole situation in this, especially like how he maintained his
It-
sort of like
It ties into his relationship with Spock so
Yeah.
well, and it gives. I've rewatched. I forget which episode it is. What's it called? What's it called? The episode where it's Journey to Babel, isn't it? I've rewatched that since where Sarek is kind of ignoring Spock, and you know he's sick, and they have to do all this, and it just it adds so much depth to that.
Yeah.
which is what you want a prequel series to do.
Which is
is
what
to
you
add
want a
depth.
prequel series to do. You want it to have
you
want it to have episodes that stand on its own and create its own television series, and it lives in its own right. And then when you do tie into a character, when you do finally show us Starrick, it's for a reason, and it brings emotional depth not only to what you're watching currently, but it helps you go back and makes you want to rewatch those original series episodes.
And then it gives those episodes more depth. It's sort of like, with all the criticism that the prequels of Star Wars get, I have to say that when I see Darth Vader pick up the Emperor and make that decision to throw him down at the end, it's so much more emotional, because now I think of Padme, and now I think like everything that Anakin had been through, and for him to like be redeemed in that moment is more impactful because of the prequels, and that's kind of what you want a prequel series to do. And so I like that it added more depth to Journey to Babel for you. So that's a win.
Well,
If I
Star Wars
can
chose
say
to do a trilogy instead of just one episode, like Lethe, but
right. But still, it's the same vibe, I guess. The
what you mean.
overall vibe.
Yeah.
Magic to make the sanest man go mad was so up.
All right, see ya.
That was your first. You gave that episode a 4, Sean. That was, and I think that's the episode where Gary just had it. He couldn't take it anymore. He just didn't know what to think, and I don't even remember what rating you gave it, Gary. So you might have to.
Probably something ridiculous or low.
I gave it a 7.5, and it's because it was such a light, even though ultimately it didn't. I think I would have given it a 9.
It wasn't
had not-
lighthearted because he was murdering everyone.
Well,
He was
no.
murdering anyway.
I'm saying my initial. You're right. You're absolutely right. But it was like, it was whimsical, I guess. I don't know what to call it, but it was different, and it stood out because again, it kind of took us out of this like heaviness of. You're right, though. When you think about it, he was murdering a lot of people in it. So I don't know what that says about me, but but I would say that like there's just a lot to like about it, but I can't get past when you the solution of the episode and how the key component of the whole story, which is Stamets, is missing from the solution. It just can't. It makes me just do a face palm and think like, how could we see this? And like, the show missed it. You know what I mean? Like how do you explain that one, Star Trek? So but despite the flaws, I think what I liked about the episode was that it was an interesting take on the time loop situation. I did like seeing a little bit of the classic Trek with the Baron and Mudd's future to be wife. So there were just little things here and there, but yeah, overall.
But again, that episode was good for character background. So exactly. I love how much I hated. How much not okay. Hate is a really strong word, but how much I didn't like. It is. Well, how much I didn't like the character of Mudd. It actually that performance from Ryan Wilson gave so much to the character itself. It gave really good background for the character, the depth to the character. So I do enjoy this episode. That's why I was so enthusiastic about that one.
I agree. What helped the episode keep some points in our ratings that we do is the fact that the same way Lethe helped with Sarek's background and Sarek's story as a character.
Yeah.
This episode really helped Mud. And it's
Yeah.
really interesting to see him with the marriage with Stella, because in the original series he hates his wife or his ex-wife.
Oh yeah.
And this
In
kind
here,
of, you kind of think, why would you even marry her in the first place? People don't change that much. And so you kind of realize that he didn't want to get married in the first place.
Right.
And this episode, I think there was the Stamets part, which I found interesting, and there was the all of the Mud scenario and situation. And we also got to see, it may seem like a small detail, but we got to see the Baron's ship, which is a civilian ship, because he's an arms dealer, and it just opens your mind to a bigger universe. It's like, hey, there are civilians roaming around with civilian ships. And I'm going to use this as an example, but when you go to see Guardians of the Galaxy, it's a very populated universe.
Yes.
And you can feel that it's buzzing all the time. There's a lot of people, everyone's got something to do, and everyone's got a ship to steal or a ship to destroy. Or
ships are like cars, and it kind of makes sense.
They've got a gym to hide. Everyone's got something to do. And it was nice to kind of feel that, even on a really small scale in this episode. You got this guy's an arms dealer. He's coming with his daughter. He's going to pick up this guy, and then he's going to go back and sell some more weapons or whatever. And it was, it was a nice ship.
Space, if there ever were a federation of planets, you would expect it to be like heavily traveled, and trade and commerce, and just, even space buses should be a thing, like
absolutely.
I'm taking the next space train to Rigel, like, or whatever.
I would expect a lot more in the kind of DS9 Voyager era than in this era, because we still are between Archer and Kirk. So that I mean, okay, fair enough. There's not that many people who don't like flying around out there. Mostly people that are flying around out there, they're doing it for commercial reasons. They're selling, they're buying, not that much leisure. But by the end of Voyager, you would expect almost at least the whole Andoria, Vulcan, kind of Earth, all of that should be overpopulated. There should just be too many ships flying around.
A lot of ships, a lot of commerce back and forth, just like on Earth today. I can drive right now, and there's going to be a traffic jam for sure. I don't know about where you live, but Gary, it's pretty late at night for you, so maybe it's a lot quieter over there. But
not necessarily. It's still quite a lot of traffic out there. I can still hear it.
I think it was in this episode where we talked about how one of the things that the episode missed out on was also that it should have completely been from Stamets' perspective, and had they been doing a show in the traditional style of following a crew, we would have gotten that, and I think it would have made more sense if it was from Stamets' perspective anyways. And then so overall that episode I think got like a 5 or 6 from us. Now we're coming to it, guys. We're almost there at the end. So name, if you can remember, for episode 8.
Suis pacem parabellum.
You just say it so well. I can't.
I apologize, because in our actual episode discussion I said vis, as if it were a V, but it's not. I went back and watched my video, and it's pronounced a W.
So Vini Vidi Vici is actually Winnie Witty Wichi?
Maybe.
It probably is. That's interesting.
Maybe.
Anyways.
But we're not talking about Caesar.
That was our... We're not. You're right. That was our lowest rated episode so far. We averaged that out to a 2.
It is ultimately just uninteresting.
We didn't have you on that discussion. So I wonder if you could, in a nutshell, tell us what you thought about that episode, and whether or not it worked for you.
Talking to Gary, right?
Yeah.
To me? Well, I wasn't it, was I? I don't remember.
Yeah. What the heck are you doing?
He doesn't care about us. He's got other things.
I do.
Yeah. I don't like disembodied, Gary. I can't tell if you're paying attention or not. You need
Okay,
to bring the face now.
okay,
He just
there we go.
left. He just left. He
No,
put it.
I'm
He put it.
Yeah.
He put
I'm
up his
still-
logo and left.
Yeah.
No.
This whole time we're having a
How would I be able
scene.
to interact with you guys then if
It's automated. That
I'm not the new Alexa Echo for seniors, you know? Oh yeah, I remember. I wasn't there.
so
But it's fine
episode.
because I wouldn't have
Pablo.
been thought about anything about the series, that episode, because it was just confusing. I liked okay. In short, what I liked about it, it was the fact that we've been into a planet, not just in a starship. It was refreshing to see a planet. It was kind of familiar with the theme that we've seen in Avatar, because everything was so blue, and the plants and everything was communicating with each other with this interesting network, and they were these floating aliens that only Saru was able to communicate with them. And the interesting fact of the episode was when Saru being possessed by these aliens, not possessed, but by so
Influence.
this transition, the peaceful Saru became so protective and so enthusiastic about the Pavans. That aspect was cool, and
He became so protective and enthusiastic that he decided to become a liar and violent.
yeah.
Which is
And suddenly
so weird
it
to me.
felt like the whole planet is the most important thing in the whole universe, and then there's other planets and other people and other life forms that equally important. But it was just confusing in a way, and it was, I don't know, I was watching it, and I didn't have a single feeling like, okay, they're fighting, why they're fighting, and oh
Black
my.
alert. Black alert. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, it is Black Alert, but go on. Sorry.
It should be blue.
Oh yeah, you can do
I'll
blue.
fix it. Anyways, go on, Gary, while I work on this. I'm gonna be distracted while you talk. No, I'm just kidding.
I think the CG was terrible. I mean, in terms of how Saru was running. I mean, okay, they used to say, if you can do better, just do it. Then don't criticize others. But it's a freaking TV show.
No, but I accept that it looks terrible on the Flash because it cost $3 million to make an episode, and it's the fucking Flash. No one cares. This is Star Trek. Star Trek has won Emmys for their
It won multiple
visual effects.
Back then.
Not just that. This episode has the highest budget of any.
Ooh.
This is Black Alert, right?
Black Alert. Okay, here we go.
I can't do that effect or whatever, but
You're gonna start spinning.
Water bubbles.
My God.
So yeah, now I'm in Black Alert as we go into the finale. But you're absolutely right, Gary. Yeah, I don't know what happened because the same writers wrote the next episode. I'm gonna blame it on the editing and the direction. I think something fell wrong.
And you can blame the whole series on anything in the direction.
I think.
Sorry, I know. I do apologize from everyone who's listening and watching.
Kirsten Bayer.
Really negative about Starfleet Discovery. I might change my mind, but it will take a long time.
Right.
I'm reading off the Wikipedia here that Kirsten Bayer wrote episode 8, which is the one we're talking about now.
Mm-hmm.
And Boyon King and Erica Lippold wrote the next one, so it's not the same.
Okay, my bad.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Kirsten Bayer. I can't imagine because she wrote a lot of Voyager books. So I know that Humbert in that discussion was like, well, that answers the reason why the episode was bad. But...
we won't be reading those anytime soon, I'm sorry.
Okay, so let's not spend too much more time on that episode.
Nope.
Finally, Into the Forest I Go. We got Sean. What's that?
Me?
You went, oh. I thought you had
no. I don't know. I don't know.
Ultimately,
I was just gonna say that there's no point, in dwelling on this episode because it's kind of disregarded by the next one anyway. So
yeah, it's true. So Into the Force I go. We got Sean's opinion in the beginning because we just reviewed it yesterday, and I think it was favorable, and again, give about 6.57 as an overall rating. But the inconsistencies do continue, although I'm very, although again, perhaps there's a reason to it. I mean, we do have statements from the producers saying that like everything that's wrong is for a reason, and if you just hang on and go through it with us. Look, Sean, I think Gary is actually asleep.
I'm asleep.
No. He's somewhat present.
Guys, Gary works 6 days a week, like 12-hour days. And so actually it is kind of a really like a nice blessing that he's here with us.
This is overkill.
Yeah, it is overkill. So we won't keep it too much longer, Gary.
No,
We're almost there.
It's fine. And honestly,
is it us or is it Star Trek Discovery itself that's boring you?
I think it's
It's Star Trek Discovery. It's not. Oh, come on, guys. I love talking with you both.
So
okay, just hear me out. Hear me out on this. If we're going to go back to the TNG discussions, I will be like up and down. Not up and down. I will be like up in the roof all the time.
Which we are going to go back to, by the way. I promise.
Honestly, I'm more excited about getting back to TNG than now talking about Discovery, and which makes a really bad point because I should be more excited about that, but I just can't.
You should, because it's new Star Trek and it's 17. You should be.
I know, but the fact is, and I know this is a side note again, but I'm more excited about the Orville itself. I think about the Orville five times a day.
I'm starting to think that Gary gets paid by Seth MacFarlane.
Yeah, you're friends with Seth MacFarlane, aren't you?
Yeah, it's like
you know him personally.
I wish.
Yeah.
I wish.
Gary,
he's setting you up to be the next helmsman on season 2, isn't
Seth, he? Come on, talk with them. Come on, Seth.
Yeah,
come on, Seth.
Hey, Lois.
I know how you feel about the Orville, but I just think it's unfair to compare the Orville to Star Trek.
It is unfair, and I try not to compare Star Trek Discovery to the Orville.
Yeah.
But if you watch any of my Star Trek Discovery reaction videos, plus if you watch my Orville reaction videos, same week, same different episodes, same different franchise, somewhat different franchise, and you can see a massive difference in my reaction. I mean, every time I watched an episode from the Orville, I had an emotional impact. It had an emotional impact in me. There were some moments when I was laughing out loud. I even cried in a couple of times, and I was like, wow, this is actually really, really special for me. Star Trek Discovery, I was literally just like staring at the screen, and I didn't get a single human emotion out of myself.
Not always. I mean, there are moments.
Not always.
Haven't had moments like that on Discovery.
When we had Sarek or the backstory for Sarek and Burnham, and we got to know the Sarek family, and when we got to know a little bit more about Mudd, I enjoyed those parts. But overall, I didn't get a single. I didn't get anything.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear what you're saying too, because I don't think I'm far from you.
First something.
Wait, I didn't hear what you said last. Our bandwidth up until now.
Yeah, because I came back in live.
Stay
you
there.
Can see me now.
It's true. Anyways, I guess so. I never got the sense. Okay, here's the thing about Star Trek Discovery Chapter 1. It seems like they started calling it Chapter 1 right at the end. It's like they don't seem to the whole impression, and I can't help it. Like, I love, I'd love to be able to just watch a TV show and not think about what's going on behind the scenes, but I can't help it. I've had enough involvement with the entertainment industry and like interest in it as well. I wanted to at one point be very deeply involved in it, and in a matter of speaking, in some ways, by doing a YouTube series, we are a part of that industry, another branch or a newer branch of it, but yet nevertheless we're a part of that industry. The thing that I can't help thinking over and over when I watch a show like that I really love, like previous Star Trek series or the Orville or Game of Thrones, is I don't really ever think about how it was made, or are there problems with the writing, or you don't think about the behind the scenes. With Discovery, I can't help but wonder, in just about every episode, is like something's not organized back there. Like there's just something on the behind the scenes part that's just not there. And I know that the show has had problems like Brian Fuller leaving, and Nick Mayer's a consultant, but I don't think he's like a prominent person. There just doesn't seem to be a head or a lead that creates a cohesive value. And so then the show becomes everything, and the writers, which is how it should be, the writers, the directors, the musicians, everyone except for the actors takes a backseat. But all we talk about in our Star Trek Discovery discussions is like, what are the writers thinking? Like, I don't understand, like, the production value, why are the ships different, and all this and that. It seems like the production itself is more of a focus than the show itself. And I hope that with Chapter 2 and beyond, we go back to find a way for us to focus on the show and the characters and the planets and the world. There's not even really a lot of world building that's gone on or any development. So again, it just feels like it's underdeveloped. Like they didn't set the frying pan hot enough, and the egg is still cooking.
To develop, though, is there? The world is already developed.
But even with sure, but within that, there's so many stories you can tell, and that's the thing, is that, like,
really, if you were to, I mean, okay, there is a lot of stories to tell within Star Trek, but if you go further along, if you do a prequel, then you're kind of stuck, especially if you don't choose a hero ship. If you're choosing the Discovery, which is just some sort of random ship, sense to say you have the most important mission in the entire Federation, because why isn't goddamn Pike doing that? It's kind of, if you want to do a prequel, or if you want to do some world building in a way that doesn't interfere, then why don't you simply make a show about people on a planet that are part of the Federation? They're not in Starfleet. It's just a planet that's part of the Federation,
right?
And they have to deal with the rules that the Federation have imposed on them. But they're not used to humans. They've never seen Vulcans. They're not used to Tellarites or Andorians. They're just some other race that their government or the governing body has now integrated them to the Federation. They have to deal with that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like an interesting take on, I don't know, however you want to call it, immigration, the integration of diversity. But then you would be world building without necessarily interfering with the grand scheme of things.
So I have a question. A question for you, gentlemen. Let's now move our discussion to the whole chapter, to kind of wrap up Chapter 1 and like give it our nice tidy rating and all that good stuff. But in Chapter 1 as a whole, what was the biggest win as far as the show, as far as you can tell? The biggest win, the biggest thing that stood out to you, what was the biggest takeaway or success of Chapter 1?
You first.
Yeah, okay, me first. But the silence tells a lot.
Well, I asked the question. I don't want to go first.
Yeah, of course. I think the biggest win is that it's back.
Star Trek's back.
Yeah, that's it. It's not the Star Trek we want. It's not made the way I want. Well, it's not the Star Trek I want. It's not made the way I want it. It's not made by the people I want to be making it, but it is back. And that kind of feels to me like there's a foot in the door. And if enough people watch it and like it, eventually we can grow towards not necessarily a Star Trek show that will 100% appeal to hardcore Trekkies, but at least a show that can kind of live up to the expectations that you have when you talk about Star Trek, and maybe we can move towards a show that better represents what Star Trek is supposed to be. So for the moment, the win is not that the show is. It's that the show
Win
is.
about the show, except for the fact that the show exists
Yeah,
itself.
the show isn't terrible. It's good for a first season. It's not a good Star Trek series. It's a good show, just as a show itself. If this had another name on it, maybe I would watch it simply because it's science fiction. I mean, I watched Extant, the 2 seasons of it, which is terrible, but I watched it because it was science fiction and it had interesting themes.
I
So-
watched it for like 4 episodes because I love Halle Berry, and then I lost interest. It was like,
That's
so
tough,
yeah, it's true.
You would have never been able to live through season 2, but Jeffrey Dean Morgan helps a lot with season 2.
Oh, cool.
You know, I watched that simply because the themes interest me. When you're talking about AI, when you're talking about aliens, when you're talking, I'm on board. You know, that kind of hooks me, even if you're dealing with it in an awkward way. Discovery is that to me. It's an awkward start, but then not only not most TV shows have awkward starts. Most Star Trek shows have awkward starts as well. But for the moment, the biggest win for the show is Star Trek is back, and having it back means that we can build towards something better. Also, as much as I hate it being a prequel, the fact I dislike the fact I don't think the show is perfect has me think that it being a prequel is good, because it means they might be able to learn from their mistakes and do a better show and set the better show in the future.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
Gary, what about you? What was the biggest win? I liked your answer a lot, Sean, by the way. And then to add, to just really quickly piggyback on it, another bonus is like bringing together a community of Trek fans in a way that you can only have when you have a show running on TV that you can talk about and stuff like that. That being said, I do still feel there are a lot of fans out there who are missing out because for one reason or another, they just can't have access to CBS All Access. It's really not All Access CBS, and that's not Star Trek's.
I don't
That's not
defend illegal downloading. I don't defend it. I'm not saying that people should do that. I'm just saying that
there are ways to watch Star Trek Discovery if you really want to.
In the world that we live in, if your excuse for not being able to watch a show is because you don't have enough money to pay for it, it's not a real excuse. If you haven't watched the show, it's because you don't want to. There are millions of ways, legal and illegal, to access a show.
And
I mean,
just to note that we are not by any means promoting
absolutely not.
Talents.
Absolutely not.
We're just saying that there are ways to watch.
I live through all of the advertisements that Space Channel throws at me when I watch the Star Trek Discovery episodes.
And Gary subscribes to Netflix, and I subscribe to CBS All Access.
All Access. We watch these. We watch very legally, but. I'm just saying there is no excuse in the world that we live in to not watch a show. If you don't watch a show, it is by choice.
That's a fair point. All right, I'd love to hear someone
unless you're
there,
like 90 years old.
Someone out there who's not watching Star Trek Discovery, but for some weird reason is watching this discussion. We'd love to hear. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Gary, the biggest win for Chapter 1 for you, I'm dying to know. Although I don't know how we could top Gordon's answer. I think it was actually the definitive answer, but go on.
I agree with Sean. Is the fact that Star Trek is back on TV is definitely a good thing, and having a new context to talk about, even if some people talk like me, not really positively about the whole show overall, but it definitely gave us some topic to talk about. That's really cool. But the biggest win overall, and I'm just feeling so sad they didn't show more about that aspect of the show, is the Shenzhou.
The
and Captain
Shanzo.
Jojo.
That's funny.
If they keep, as Sean, you said, if you see, I was listening even I was on screen. So when you said it, if they keep like one season just with Captain Jojo and the Shenzo and the crew and everything, and getting the sort of Discovery feel and just building up the tension toward the war or whatever going to happen, that would have been more impactful. Because I really loved that first 2 episodes. I mean, if I have to think about Discovery, the first episode comes in my mind straight away.
So if they did a miniseries,
then I can think about Sarek. Yeah, if they do a miniseries on
like
the
a 10-episode
Shenzo
miniseries spin-off of just like
yeah.
the Shinjo, let's say, because they Burnham and Jojo had been together for like 7 years or something. So if we had like a miniseries of 10 episodes taking place on the 4th year of that, would you watch that? Everyone would watch that, I think.
I would watch that. I would definitely watch that.
Yeah, for sure.
Just exploration and
yeah, classic Star Trek. Seeking new life forms and new civilization, and boldly going where no man has gone before, or woman.
Where no one.
Oh,
you have to include
no one has
non-gendered,
gone before.
non-gendered species as well.
So that would be interesting and cool. And but I think we talked about this. I
have a slight issue with that, by the way. But
I think I had a conversation with Yoshon a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about that. If I'm ever gonna watch Discovery again, because it's not a big secret, but with Starfleet Discovery, I only watched the first episode twice when we watched the pilot. I basically watched that first episode twice, and ever since I watched the episodes, I didn't watch them again. So I watched it once, and that's it, done. If I'm gonna give a chance to this series in a couple of maybe next year or whatever, a year later, or before season 2 kicks in, see how I think about the episode. Maybe it will change my mind. Maybe I will see it in a different way.
I think you're right, and I think overall, what happens though with any series, because again, season 1 of Star Trek, I don't. If I weren't doing my discussion, I would probably go back and maybe watch 1 or 2 episodes. But I think like later seasons of Star Trek: The Next Generation, there's so many more episodes per season that I watch, especially like when you get into season 3, I'm like, oh yeah, I always go to those episodes. So like, I think with Discovery Chapter 1, there's more forgettable episodes than there are memorable episodes. There are like the only real episode that I can think about from Chapter 1 that I would go back and watch is the Battle of the Binary Stars, and the Vulcan Hello Battle of Binary Stars. I might go back and watch Lethe again, and maybe just because it was, just to see if I can find any evidence of clues for what's going to come next, I would watch Into the Force I Go. But other than that, like, I'm okay. I'm like, oh yeah, I watched season 1. I get it. There's not much outside of, there's not much there that's compelling me to go back and rewatch it either.
Okay, so I'm going to finish by following up on what you guys said. And I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Mm-hmm.
Discovery is the first truly serialized Star Trek television series. I know Deep Space Nine was serialized, but it still was formatted in such a way that you could watch episodes and episodes. Discovery, if you would have watched just episode 4, wouldn't really make any sense. And it doesn't have a certain specific theme to it, which means that stands out. Which, this is why I'm saying devil's advocate. That's probably why you can't actually go back and just pick out one episode and watch it.
I agree. No, I totally agree with you. You're right.
Because we're talking about a show that I don't I do enjoy, but
this podcast not sponsored by Coca-Cola, by the way.
Not at all. But we're talking about a show that we have mixed feelings on. If I were to talk about a show like The Expanse, which is a show that I do not have mixed feelings about, I love it.
What was the show?
The Expanse.
The Expanse. I gotta watch that.
You can't go back and watch. You can't go back and watch one episode. You have to watch.
You have to watch the whole season. I feel like that's the same.
Yeah. No, the series.
The
You
series.
have to watch. You can't just watch season 2.
That's true about Battlestar Galactica. Also, I feel like you're right.
Dexter is different. Dexter is. Don't know if you guys have seen that. So this isn't science fiction at all, but
You're in there.
essentially Dexter,
The serial killers kill serial killers.
he's a serial killer who kills serial killers, and it's structured in a way that kind of every season has a very specific arc in the sense that he has an enemy. Sometimes it's a cop, sometimes it's another serial killer, etc., etc. Which means you can watch season 4
By itself.
by itself. It goes up against a guy called Trinity, and that season by itself, you don't even need to see the rest of the series. That season works, and it's probably one of the best seasons on television.
Oh wow! Okay.
But you couldn't watch one episode. It makes no sense. It's really part of a story. So I think Discovery, it's unfair to say you can't watch one episode because it's not made to be watched that way. It's made to be binge watched. Clearly.
Good point.
The interesting question that we were asking with Gary the other day is, let's say in 10, 20 years time, when Discovery is, I suppose it's ended and it's now just part of all of these other series that we have. If you were to do an epic run and rewatch all of the shows, would you watch Discovery with it? I think I would. But to not end on it, I think I would for once start with Enterprise. I would go Enterprise, Discovery, original series, and because
it'll just get better as you go, and then you hit Voyager, and then that's it.
Hey.
What do you guys, on a scale of 1 to 10, give Chapter 1 of Star Trek Discovery? I don't know why I had to do that voice.
Okay, so I guess this is me first because Gary always waits for my answer, doesn't he?
You know me well.
I'll go.
Go ahead.
If you guys want. I don't mind giving my rating. So overall, I'm gonna have to give Star Trek Discovery Chapter 1 because 5's a solid, good. It's like watchable. It's not like terrible, but it's not great either. So for me, it's a 5. It's like, again, not what I expected it to be, but also not terrible. So yeah, Chapter 1 gets a 5 from Starfleetboy. What about you now?
So am I still going before you, Gary, or now are you?
Of course, you're still before me.
Okay, so
Gary wants the last word.
He does.
No, I don't want the last word. It's just.
Now he's got that epic rating that he's gonna give, so he wants to build up the suspense.
Yeah, after all these rating, I'm gonna give like 10.
Oh my god!
Wow.
Never gonna happen.
I would absolutely agree in the fact that the show it's presenting a lot of good things to me and a lot of bad things. It's just confusing at this point, which means I would go for a good, strong, solid 5 as well. Place, put it right smack down in the middle there.
Yeah. Mr. Gary, your time is up.
Will it be a 10? Will it be a 12?
I try to fix myself. I can't. I think I go with it. It doesn't work. The battery's off.
For those of you that don't know, that's a sonic screwdriver in Gary's hand. He's not just happy to see us. Oh my.
Oh my.
Anyways, oh my.
Doesn't work. I would go with a 3.
Wow. But it's
That's an awkward 3, but
that is an awkward 3. Star Trek 3. Wow, Gary.
I'm still on board, but I'm giving it a 3.
That's like low. Really, that's low. Shiitake.
That's a good mushroom then.
That is quite low.
There you go. You just tied in the mushroom, the fungus, and it reminds me of
See that, CBS? You got to hire Gary, Sean, and I to be your chief critical consultants. That's what we are. We're the critical consultants. Like, we're not.
We should be like the focus group of Star Trek Discovery. They make the episode, we watch it, and if you like it or not, we just tell them like, okay, do it again.
Okay, well, to be fair, we could maybe read the script instead of having them actually make the episode before we say no. But that's gonna be not very cost effective, but
Never mind Star Trek CBS. Never mind CBS.
Then after one wrong episode, they might learn from it and they just do it right.
Well,
maybe, yeah.
You're very hard. You're much harsher than I am, Gary.
And I honestly, I do apologize. My behavior is unacceptable.
There's no
No,
reason
it's
to
completely
apologize.
understandable.
You're completely being honest, and like, that's something that's a value that I think Star Trek espouses, is that and moving past the show for a second, just like the reason why people love Star Trek, the reason why I love Star Trek, and perhaps why we love Star Trek, is because one of the most important things you get from it is that Star Trek like really encourages you to be yourself and to express your feelings and articulate yourself so that a discussion can occur, and so that and feel confident that like your opinion's valid even if it's not popular. And so I think if you apologize, if you apologize, I will be upset at you.
Something that I hold against Star Trek Discovery, I don't know how to call the opposite of haters, but lovers, fans, I suppose.
Lovers gonna love, haters
admirers. There you go.
Admirers. No, I mean, those who enjoy Star Trek Discovery, I find them unpleasant in the sense that they disregard and disrespect those who do not necessarily enjoy the show.
I think
there are many people that are shutting down entirely, like the show is stupid, they hate it. But there are others like us which are just generally concerned with certain choices, and a lot of Star Trek fans are kind of, I don't know, they don't, our opinions don't seem valid. But it's not because we don't enjoy what the show's doing that our opinions are not as valid as yours.
I think I know. I think for me, what I've observed is that there's this like on both sides. There's people who are completely like against the show for a number of reasons that shut out anyone who is expressing anything positive about the show. And then there's other people that are like, they're like light soldiers, like, or paladins for the series, and they're like smacking down anyone who speaks negatively of it. But I think that these are the ones with loud voices, but I think the majority of Star Trek viewers and Star Trek fans are probably more in the middle ground, where they're just like, yeah, I don't have to love everything that's shoved in my face, about Star Trek. And at the same time, I can be confident about my opinion about it as well. Like, I know that it's very easy to get caught up in those discussions because you go on Twitter and it's like a shitstorm sometimes, depending on what's going on politically and everything else, and it can be really disheartening, like, to like read these things. But I think it's important to remember that these are the loudest voices. Like, these are people like, and Twitter itself has an algorithm that brings to your attention things that are trending. So it's not necessarily the truth. It's more just like what is the most popular or the most loud opinion, if you will. So.
But it is dangerous because those who haven't seen the series yet will be kind of shown these loud opinions.
I agree, but
and
ultimately,
those who are producing the show will see those loud opinions first.
I agree. There's that danger, of course, but I think ultimately, if you really want to know something, you explore it for yourself. And so I can't imagine that someone who wants a rich and full Star Trek experience would just go based on what the buzz is on Twitter and so on and so forth. They'll go and judge for themselves, and they'll decide what camp they're on at that point. As far as the producers and everything like that, it would be sad if they're only looking at praise and not looking at critique.
Well,
because
I was about to mention that, yeah.
It's ultimately going to be to their detriment, because if you can't see if you can't at least empathize with someone who disagrees with you, you're doomed to failure. And so I think that, like, again, they should be encouraging discourse and conversation in a polite manner. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, there's no excuse for, like, calling, name
Bashing on the
calling, and
series
like
and
bullying
hating on the
and things
series.
like
Yeah.
that. Right, exactly. But I think if you're respectful and you genuinely try to express your feelings in a thoughtful way, that you can't go wrong. And I feel like that's what we're trying to do here, in our discussions at least.
Not to single out anyone, but there's another Star Trek podcast called the Nerd Escape podcast that is hosted by Damien, aka the Irish Trekkie, and Chris the Trick Collector, which audience you should go and watch as well. But they have a much more positive.
I subscribe to those channels.
We're all subscribed.
All of us.
We
All
know
of
them.
us, yes.
We know them. Yeah, we all talk. They have very positive views on the series, and when they tweet those videos, when they tweet those conversations, there's at least 6 or 7 people that are currently working on Discovery, be it Doug Jones, Anthony Rapp, Ted Sullivan. Those people retweet, those people like his posts. Now, I understand that it might be done as a kind of promotional way, on a promotional side. For example, these guys are doing podcasts that are very positive about Discovery, so they want to retweet them, they want to like those posts, so that people that's promoting their series. But I really hope that they do take the time to sometimes not just watch those podcasts, but also maybe ours. People like Trek Yards, which are more negative than us, I feel, so that they get the full spectrum of opinions and don't just dismiss or don't just not look at us and only see those that are praising them.
I think that you're absolutely right with that regard, but I do think that you answered your own question, that the people working on the show, I think they're going to be, especially in this delicate beginning stage where a show can easily lose confidence, and if I think it's definitely what you said. There's nothing to dispute in what you say. The people working on the series, it only behooves them to highlight praise and like things like that, because it is hard, I think, to take criticism when you've invested so much. Like, I mean, I know that like from friends who work in the entertainment industry, anytime you give them critique, they do take it harder. I think entertainers take it harder because their whole job is to make you happy and to please you and to like, to make you, to do that. So yeah, I definitely see what you're saying there. Absolutely. But I think that, like, at least for me, the reason I do Starfleet Boy and maybe, there are things that I am like Damien about, where it's like I can't stop saying, or whatnot. But Star Trek right now just doesn't happen to be one of those things. So like I respect when someone feels like so into something that that the show can do no wrong, because I've been there before, but it's just not how I feel about Star Trek at the moment.
Message to the producers and writers and everyone working on the show: if by any chance you actually watch this, when a random artist puts out a song, if I don't like the song, I'm just not going to listen to it, and I'm going to move on with my life. If I do like the song, then I'm going to listen to it. If a new TV series comes out that I don't necessarily enjoy, I'm just going to move on. Star Trek is different. That is why I criticize Star Trek. But I don't criticize Star Trek to make you feel bad. I criticize Star Trek to make it the best it can possibly be, because I want the best Star Trek I can possibly have. Which means that every time I say something displeases me with Star Trek, it's because I feel there's so much potential in this franchise, and I feel it could be one of the most important entertainment franchises that exists on this earth, and I'm simply disappointed that it is not currently. That's why we are kind of honest and truthful with our criticism.
And that's what troubles, I think, all of us. I mean, especially I have really difficult and rough time ever since the series started to actually accept this is Star Trek. I mean, I grew up watching the TNG Voyager DS9, and although I remember the first time when I watched DS9, I was like, why do I have to watch this stupid space station? That was my first line, watching after 5 minutes after the episode. And the pilot episode, I fell in love with the series, and I had this. I never had a single moment when I was like, "Oh, I don't like it. I don't like this." I loved every Star Trek ever since I watched them. So, as I used to say, 66 till 2005. That's the golden years of Star Trek. that long years, and then the Kelvin movies are sort of joined into the picture now. But this is the first Star Trek that I can't just accept, and I can't really engage with it as much as I engage with the other ones, and that's really troubles me.
But I don't want it to be like that. I want this. That's why when I talk to the producers, well, as I'm talking to them now, but they probably won't listen. But if they do, we're not here to hate on you. We're not here to make your job hard, and we're not here to make you
No,
feel bad.
absolutely.
We're here to help you make the show better, if possible.
I think I
Because
mean
that's what we
I
want
don't
ultimately.
I don't necessarily try to speak to. I mean, even though at times I do say, "Hey, writers," or "Hey, producers," it's more tongue in cheek there. But I think that I think I definitely don't try to speak directly to them. I tag like Ted Sullivan or something, in a tweet or whatnot. But I definitely don't expect him to again to notice me when he has like 40,000 followers or whatever number of people who are tweeting at him constantly.
Absolutely.
But what I will say is that I do think I can't get like too specific, but on the other show, the Drunk Space Nine show, I happen to know that like several of the stars and people have tuned into it. And I think there might be the possibility that like Anthony Rapp may have given Starfleetboy a chance too. So I do think that they are out there trying.
But Brent Spiner
Trying
definitely gave me a chance.
Yeah, and Brent Spiner gave you a chance, Gary. So that's so cool. Like, I think that like just as much as like I think we have to remember that just as much as Twitter can be a daunting and scary place, there are these positive things that like you do have access to Star Trek producers in a way that no one ever previously. Like when Next Generation had a bad episode, you had to sit down, handwrite a letter, send it to Paramount, and hope that it got to
the right
to
person.
the writers. Now I just log onto my Twitter account and I'm like, "Rah, rah, 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 Starfleet to Star Trek Discovery," and then like there's a really good chance that someone is going to see it. And so I do think I do think that like we live in a time where that kind of input from audiences is like nothing ever before. And that, again, I can only imagine that like I don't have anywhere near the
Hopefully they pay attention to that.
right. But I can tell you that it's really hard to stay organized and on schedule as Starfleetboy, and I only have 100, followers, and maybe 5 of those people are engaged, and 3 of them are here right now. So I would say that like if I'm having a tough time keeping up with just that with my job and everything else, like I can only imagine what it's like when 40,000 people are trying to give you their opinion about Star Trek. So I do have a little bit of like I do have a little bit of like understanding for them. But before we end our discussion of Star Trek, I'm trying to be dramatic. Sorry, guys. Star Trek Discovery's Chapter 1. Predictions for Chapter 2.
Oh,
Go for it. Predictions. I think Gary should go first.
Want me to go first?
No, if you already
Gary,
have
go ahead. Gary.
What, me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have any predictions. I have only one
A hope. A new hope.
A new hope. I hope, and this is gonna be my closing statement as well. I hope the second chapter will put my faith back into the Discovery franchise.
Excellent.
That's my only statement. That's the only thing. That's the only thing that I have to say.
That's deep.
Super deep. Star Trek Don't Fail, Gary. We're
My
gonna
God.
revisit that
It's really
at the end of
deep.
Chapter 2.
I feel
we're
stupid
gonna
saying what I was gonna say, but
no, say it. We need to go. We need to go from the sublime to the ridiculous.
Oh god. Oh, thank you.
Just kidding.
Wow.
Just
No, my predictions are we're gonna spend a few episodes. My predictions are we are in the mirror universe, and we're gonna spend a few episodes in the mirror universe, and it's gonna go either two ways. We're gonna leave the mirror universe, but find ourselves in Prime Timeline, which I think is a kind of a distant dream, but it would be nice. I think what would be nice would be we go back to the timeline that they are from, which is Prime, but we go back to where they came from. It is Prime, but somehow seeing how the mirror universe turned out because of these bad or negative choices that the Terran Empire chose, everyone on the Discovery, Captain Lorca especially, has kind of a U-turn in his personality, thinking, hey, look, if everyone's an asshole like me, we get a Terran Empire instead of a Federation. Maybe it's like an example of showing them what shouldn't be done, and they would come back, and we would get a more hopeful, optimistic chapter 2 of Star Trek.
I dig it. I dig it.
I like that.
I totally agree with Sean as far as predictions go. Similar ideas about what's going to happen in chapter 2. I do think we're going to spend quite a few episodes, as was alluded to by I think Jonathan Frakes, in the mirror universe. So I do think that we're going to see the mirror universe itself. Rationalize that Discovery is not in the Prime timeline. I have to swallow the bitter pill that yes, it is the Prime timeline, but you inspired me just now to wonder if, because of the way that because up until now we've only kind of like accidentally stumbled into the mirror universe. Like I think the original series, it was an ion storm and then a transporter accident, and then I don't remember how it happens in Deep Space Nine. Gary, maybe it's more fresh in your memory, but how do they stumble into the mirror universe in that one?
I don't
start the show. It's just like the show.
No. I think that they involved that's not just transporter as well. They find out a way how to use the transporter to actually
go there and back.
Go there.
Anyways, did Voyager do a mirror universe?
No, they didn't. I think that's the only Star Trek series then.
Enterprise,
and New Generation.
Enterprise was different. They didn't actually go to the mirror universe. Enterprise just
they didn't do
2 episodes.
They did an episode in the mirror universe.
That's right.
Which would be an interesting miniseries also. I would watch a 10-episode miniseries in the mirror universe.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Which I love that they even changed the theme song for those Enterprise episodes to have that like
Terran Empire theme.
Which is pretty cool. But I do wonder now, because of the way that the Discovery travels, if when they come back to the Prime timeline, if things just the aesthetic changes to be more like the original series, which is what the producers were predicting, that as we get closer to the original series, you'll start to recognize more and more of the original series aesthetic. So I wonder if that'll come into play somehow. My hope for chapter 2 is that we seek out new life and new civilizations, and that we boldly go where no one has gone before. And on that note, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on this. It was a really awesome. I had a fun time about this, and I think it was great and cathartic for me to like wrap up all these like kind of feelings about Star, because you get a lot of feelings. You're super invested in this stuff, and it's good to share some time with friends.
Yeah, these are the things that you're really passionate about.
I mean, it's science fiction, but it is important. They don't like the science of the show isn't that coherent, nor is the fiction.
No, I think it's the fact that Star Trek has changed many of our lives for the better, and brought us together. That's the whole thing, and it's just beginning something that doesn't belong to us at the moment.
So I look forward to seeing you guys again for some TNG discussions coming up in the next couple of weeks. And and until then, live long and prosper, and I'll see you next time.